Waiting, and we are on. Hey, Thomas, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Confused and flustered. I am going to apologize right out of the gate to everybody at Brand DIY. We are now 18 minutes behind. And Thomas, we usually do prep before the show to get ready for it. And we didn't have a chance to do any of that either. So yeah, I'm feeling kind of sheepish, but I know you've got amazing material. So I did not want to postpone this.
I'm super happy to be here, even 18 minutes late. So
I said before, it's not network television. They didn't have to postpone the Super Bowl and hold it for us. But I'm fascinated by your topic. I just want to give just a little brief background. You came at me out of the blue going, hey, I might have something interesting here. I said, what do you got? You said, I do prototyping through conversation. I'm like, what? So I want to dig into what the heck is prototyping by conversation? I want to dig into your background because you're a researcher, academic, you've spoken all around the world, you've done TED Talks, and you have this methodology for coming up with new ideas that I think would be fascinating for entrepreneurs who are taking control of their brand. So let's start at the start. What is the prototyping model that you're talking about?
yeah, so after I did my TED Talk at Emily Carr here in Vancouver, I had to come up with something to talk about. I had an audience and I had to come up with something to say to them. And I didn't have anything to say. And so that's how I kind of came up with this idea, which is called Unique Ways of Prototyping. It's a talk workshop that I give at conferences and universities and meetups. And I'm really excited to be here with you to talk about this entrepreneurial angle with it. It is based on, as you said, some ideas about prototyping using just voice, using a conversation, or for example, writing on a whiteboard. This idea that simple writing or simple conversation can be prototyping, I thought was unique and fun, and so it's been something that I've wanted to give to the audience. I first came across it at a conference in Bangalore. Actually, I was attending a conference in Bangalore, and they were doing prototyping with voice, and I thought I have to bring this to Canada.
So, what did you see in Bangalore? What caught your attention?
So the workshop was around role play, and the talk workshop that I do for the workshop portion, I do a thing called role play, which is essentially the prototyping with voice. It's really, I'm a designer by training, and grew up thinking prototyping is something that you do. You spend 3 months building a nice prototype, and then you kind of show it to stakeholders and get a yay or nay.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's back to the drawing board for another 3 months before you present again. And I was like, there's something wrong with this. We can get stuff in front of people way faster. We can get sign off way faster. We can know what's wrong with our ideas or what's working with our ideas way faster. And it won't be all inclusive, it won't be everything, but some of these ideas can come out right at the beginning, and that was a big kind of jumping off point for this. In Bangalore, in this workshop, I was there with other designers and design educators, and we were paired up and asked to prototype through voice product or service. The one that I always use for my workshop is Siri. I think Siri is really interesting because it's something that we understand but don't understand. And so I have a conversation I have the two people pair up, and one person represents Siri, which is the product, and one person represents a user of Siri, and the two people just talk to each other. And through that conversation, you actually learn a lot about your product or service.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Yep.
Let's do a Siri talk. So Siri takes orders. You tell Siri what to do, and Siri does it.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So, okay. So do you want to be Siri or the user of Siri?
Yeah, sure.
You choose user or product.
Okay, I'll be the user. I'll be the user. So my
Right.
job in this is to say I want to create something, right?
Okay. So I don't understand the syntax.
Create new flavor of chewing gum.
I don't know how to do creative. Can you rephrase that?
Flavors of chewing gum.
Strawberry, chocolate, and vanilla.
Favorite flavors for dessert.
Can you rephrase that? I don't understand the term dessert.
Favorite food.
Pancakes. So you get the idea, right? So like we reveal some stuff, right? Ordinarily you would have a third person who would be listening in on this and listening for what's there. But I mean, for me, just having done this a lot, I can hear a lot of what's happening here already. Siri is digital. Siri is computing, and so it can only understand certain things in a certain way, unlike a human can.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, in this conversation that we just had, there's a little bit more human than there would ordinarily be with Siri, right? With Siri, you don't expect it to be able to improvise that much or to give you some funny answers, even if it's trying to. And so,
what this means to me is that we have a set of assumptions that we go in with that people on the receiving end are just going to get it or do it. And we got to backpedal and go, wait a minute. Are we assuming too much, right?
That's exactly it. So we're at step one. We're at, we're daydreaming about our product, and we need a jumping off point. And before we even start, we have assumptions. How can we test those assumptions right out of the gate?
Wild. What else do you do? I mean, this is fascinating. And by the way, I'm going to be linking your name in BrandDIYGroup because we have a lot of folks who are running their own entrepreneurial companies. They're inventing stuff. They're innovating stuff. This sort of a process they should take you up on to bring you in and make them wise on this. So what else is in it? What else is involved?
I mean, I can kind of go through the 5 easy to listen to bullet points around what I talk about with unique ways of prototyping.
Please.
One is iteration, which you might know from design thinking. It's a kind of a cyclical way of working. You start with an assumption. Assumption was right on with what you said. That's what you start with. And then you make something, you make anything. You can make a conversation, you can make a drawing on a whiteboard, and then you show it to someone and get their feedback. And based on that, you have a new assumption, and then you can make something new and show that to someone. And again, you have new ideas and you work in that cyclical way. That's the iteration model that I use with unique ways of prototyping. And that always reveals new things very quickly. And as you can imagine, each time you iterate, you're revealing more new things. So, very cost friendly, obviously, is the conversation. It costs a person's time, but aside from that, it's not a lot of time and you can do it quickly. Another aspect is people first. So I always focus on, your audience may know about value proposition design. So I always focus on understanding who your audience is, and then making something for them. That works really well with this role play where you have a user and your product, and you don't focus so much on the product, but you listen more to the user, to what they're going through, and maybe you can empathize a bit in that way. There are other bullet points, modalities, visibility, research.
It's interesting. It's really funny because to everybody listening, the whole idea of user first, and trying to get into the head of the user, you go, yeah, that's so obvious. And if I had a nickel for every time that I saw a company that did inside out innovation, which is we invented something we think is really cool, go sell it. That used to be the model in the 1980s. It was, we're going to invent new floor cleaner. Why people like their old floor cleaner? Well, because we think it's a great idea, sell it. And so you'd pump millions of dollars into selling something that eventually would die a sad little death because nobody wanted it. And when you talk to people, I don't think you'll find anybody who disagrees with, you got to start with the customer. What do they want? But when it actually comes to inventing stuff, so many of us don't do that. Why?
Why is a really good question. And I think that in the design world, we realized that we have to address that why. And there was a guy named Alan Cooper who came across this persona's idea of having 5 people in your target audience, 5 generalizations, 5 stereotypes, as if that would cover everyone, right? And with what I do, I'm very much more about, let's sit down and talk to each individual person and find out what their real needs and opportunities are, instead of creating these stereotypes around them. But for example, in the design industry, for a long time, we've relied on this idea that you can just create 5 personas and that will cover your audience, as if we're addressing the audience now, when really it's very hypothetical. So I think, yeah, good to move a step beyond, let's just make something and pump it out there, into we're making it for actual people. And a step beyond that is, who are those people really? Like, let's really understand those people.
You know, it's funny because hearing you talk, I see a value far beyond innovation in what you do. I see somebody who's COVID, economic meltdown, a lot of people gotten thrown out of their comfy, cushy jobs. They go to incubators, they've got an idea for a better, stretchier rubber band, and they want to develop that into a new thing, a SaaS model for rubber bands. And they go in and they invest months of their time, and they bring this thing to market, maybe, and then it dies, and then they cry, and they go and they work for BC Ferries or the government. But to me, it seems like what you do beyond innovation, it helps people get a really healthy grasp on themselves and what they offer to the world, and how to mesh that with what people actually want through a much maligned and underused medium, which is talking to each other. We
That's
all
right.
do this. We all do research on SurveyMonkey or online polling, or, you know, do you find that your model goes far beyond just inventing new stuff to helping people get a grasp on what they should be doing?
One thing you're making me think about is, a nice thing about this conversation is it's addictive. You know, a cheap way to prototype, and we can do it anytime and have a conversation and we can laugh about it. I mean, that's something that you're going to want to keep doing, considering the alternative, which is some high fidelity prototyping that may or may not work. You can do it at the beginning. You know, I've got this new material, this stretchy material, and here's a hypothetical user. Let's have a conversation between those. And then you can do it later down the line, where you've got your first piece of the stretchy material, and it's in your hand, and you 2 people are talking, and one person's got the stretchy material in their hand, and now it's a more higher fidelity because you have an actual physical thing to do with it. It's
Mhm.
just adding the conversation piece. A lot of people think that piece has to come at the very beginning, but it can come at any stage, and it can always add value.
You know, it seems to me like what you have to give to the world is, in business, a way to move a conversation to something that is productive and leads to making, rather than a conversation. A lot of conversations I've been involved in where they go, we got to figure out how to make something. And it goes around and around in circles for 90 minutes. And then everybody goes like that. And they go, well, that was a good day. It seems like a very human way of creating a methodology for moving things forward, getting problems solved, getting new stuff on the board, just by assuming some new roles and some new ways of interacting. Probably be really good for human relationships as well. Do you find?
I've run this before in a similar way, and the result was, I think this is going to save marriages.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. I didn't want to say it, but that's what I'm thinking. I think that this thing will save marriages because it creates a productive conversation, you know, and it breaks down biases because you're forced to interact like with Siri. Siri doesn't know what you're talking about. You know, so
Yeah,
many times your assumption with your wife or spouse, completely different frames of reference. You have conflict, you don't know why, and then you go off to your different rooms.
you're right on. It does simplify things in terms of the language, in terms of, for example, the iteration process only has 3 pieces, and they're all very dumbed down in a way. Not dumbed down in the results that you'll get, dumbed down in the language that we use to describe it. Also, I try to address the word prototyping and the word making right at the beginning. I think a lot of us get scared of the word prototyping, and when they hear the word making, they think of making out of clay or making something tangible or using code or something like that. When really, when you're having a conversation and you're just talking, you're actually making, you're bringing things into the world. And I think that as soon as you come to terms with that, and realize that in a simple conversation you're making and prototyping, you have access to whole new processes that you didn't know existed.
You know what? I see this as a part two. I'm looking at part two right now. Speaking of prototyping, I'm prototyping what you're doing to Brand DIY. And I'm curious if you would be, I've never done this before on Brand DIY, so I'm kind of on thin ice, but I'm curious if you would be willing to run a workshop for us on, because I just see that if I put you in front of the class, and a lot of times we have people dialing in for the show, but throughout the day, what I find is dozens, if not hundreds of people dial in on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and BrandDIYGroup, but put you out front and have you actually lead a sort of a workshop. Would you be willing to do something like that?
I would love to do that. Absolutely, Mark.
Well, let's set up a date, because I think that, right now we can get into this conversation, but again, we've run over time, and I usually budget the certain amount of time for people who are watching live. And I want to respect your time as well, but I see this as like a half hour, 45-minute session where you basically walk us through the steps of prototyping and how we can apply that to our lives.
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea.
Now, okay, well, I'm going to do that after we talk here. I'm going to ask you about that, and we're going to set it up and we're going to advertise it properly so people come. Now, if folks are curious in this, and I can't see why they wouldn't be curious about this, if they're curious about this, how do they follow up? What do you have materials out there? You've got the TEDx talks that I can link. You've got a list as long as my arm of places that you've spoken at. Are there materials that you would point us to?
There are, yeah. I've got a more fleshed out version of the presentation that we just did, all recorded. I've got a great Zoom recording of that being run at UBC Sauder School of Business as part of their hackathon. So that's great to check out. We have some audience interaction there where Q&A can come up, and some people are like, what was that? I don't understand what that was. And other people are like, that just blew my mind a bit. Thomas, can you give me a push? And I've got all of that. I've got visuals for it as well to clarify in that way too. So yeah, we can put all that together and get it out there.
Okay, well, that's going to be my job with you, because I just see that we have just touched the tip of the iceberg here, and there's going to be materials that are worth putting out. And if I just say, hey, here's the show notes, it doesn't have the right effect. I want folks to experience you if they're not here now and they're not watching today. I want to advertise, and I want to have materials and things they can read and things they can do so they can do it themselves. So that's the whole spirit of this thing.
Absolutely. I think it's fantastic.
All right, amigo, let's do that. Let's set that up and set up an hour for you, and we'll publicize it properly, and we'll get the word out, and we'll put you in front of our brand DIYers, and I'm sure we'll take incredible stuff away from this.
Awesome. Well, sounds good.
Thank you again, and apologies for starting late. It never happened. This is, again, the first time this has happened. Apologies for starting late, and apologies to the brand DIYers for starting late. And we'll make it up to you, because I'm going to put Thomas in front of all of us, and we'll advertise it properly so he can lead a proper workshop for us. I think it's going to be a great one.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Talk to you soon.